Hi, welcome back. There's a few different things happening today. There's going to be a very short sermon. There's going to be some answers to questions I asked online. And then there's an interview with Mark Morgan, who has been coming along to Riverside both in person and online in the last year or so. So, Mark, I've never had a conversation with you that lasted less than 5 minutes, so I'm not sure how we're going to
No,
manage.
no, this is going to be a tough one.
But I wanted to get you a chance to introduce yourself. It's not quite last into the church should introduce themselves, but I did have a few questions for you as we've got to know each other in house group, and I thought it'd be interesting for the rest of the church to hear it.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Let's
The
do
the
it.
first the first question was to do with you. You've come from a completely different type of church in Glasgow, and I wondered if you'd tell us a bit about that, and then also I'm interested in like other things we could learn now that you've got to know us a bit better. Are the things that we could learn or imitate that would be useful from how that church act or behave?
Okay. Um, yeah, this is going to take some
There's nothing
not in
like a
terms of
compound question to start with, is there?
not in terms of but yeah. So I came from a sort of a church that derived from Hillsong Church Australia. So the senior pastor came over from Australia and planted a church in Glasgow, and yeah, I guess you would guess some people might refer to it as charismatic. Some people might call it happy clappy. I don't know, which is fine. Um, so yeah, different culture, different way of doing things, but at the same time very similar.
Uh-huh. So what would be similar?
The message is the same. The very core of what the church back in Glasgow is completely the same. Um, Maybe the presentation might be a bit different. Maybe how they organise their services might be a bit different. But at the very core, if you were to sit down at a table with five of Riverside's congregation and five of that church's congregation, they would agree on pretty much everything,
Mhm.
I guess. So yeah.
And so
And
what have you learned? What kind of stuff did you guys do there that worked or that we might consider thinking about or using?
uh, so I guess they were, maybe, I don't want to say this in a bad way, but I guess they were a bit more advanced in terms of how they presented things or in terms of how they approached things.
Hmm.
So yeah, so they had the visuals to go along with the message.
Hmm.
They had the lights to go along with the worship. And that's not to say that not having that stuff's a bad thing. It's just what is palatable to modern day people,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
If you go to an event, there's a reason why you enjoy the strobe lights. There's a reason why you enjoy feeling that bass when it, or the kick drum when it kicks the
Yeah.
drum. There's a reason why that's that you go away from that experience feeling absolutely amazing.
Hmm.
And that's not to say Riverside should, black out their windows and do all that stuff. It's to say, um, don't dismiss anything offhand.
Hmm.
We should always be open to anything that someone brings to the table. And this isn't just the church that I went to, but most churches that I know of that, like, they're not afraid to fail.
Okay. Yeah, 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 yeah.
They'll try something and they'll go, right, that was a bit of a miss. We'll probably not do that again. Or they'll try something and say, actually, that kind of worked, but what if we'd done that? It worked much better. And
Hmm.
they would change it. And so I think what I would take to Riverside is don't be afraid to fail. Like
Hmm.
if I'm part of a team ever in Riverside, then I will absolutely encourage people and pester people to fail. I can't remember who it was that wrote the book Failing Forwards.
Oh, do you know? I'm not sure either, but okay.
Yeah, and it's like, it's the whole premise is learning from your mistakes. But when you fail, don't give up. Fail forward.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Well, see, that's interesting because maybe it's the culture, the Australian thing. Sorry, because I've got a mate who said to me before, and again, I'm not entirely sure, from my own experience how this works, but he was kind of saying that in the United Kingdom, if you've been bankrupt, that's considered a really bad thing. Maybe you're
Yeah,
not trustworthy. But in the States, being bankrupt is not a problem, and it shouldn't really affect whether you start again or get money again to start another business.
yeah, yeah. But then could you imagine if, like, we would be missing some of the great kings of the faith if they failed once and never done it again.
Mm-hmm.
The name Billy Graham might not be around if he just thought, "Oh no, that didn't work. I'm not gonna try that again." You know,
I only
think
got
of it.
40. I only got 40,000 at that stadium. I'm not doing that again.
We hosted a band once. I can't remember the name, but um, oh my goodness. But anyway, they had an album out called Life in Technicolor,
Mm-hmm.
and everything through the preparation went fine. And the drummer actually controlled the words of the song with his kick.
Wow.
I don't know how it worked. I wasn't that privy, but it was super cool. But halfway through, the electrics just cut out.
Oh no.
Everything went down. We were in the QMU at the time. I never remember it. But it was one of the best worship nights of my life because we just sang "How Great Is Our God" over and over again. Because everybody, even if you're a Christian or not, knows how great is our God.
Some churches, if that happened, no one would know the difference. We just sing it over and over again.
But yeah, but again, that's one of those things. You know, something went wrong, but you improvise, you go on, and you don't let it get to you.
I like that message about not being afraid to fail. So I had another question for you,
Okay.
and that was you can confide it in me, but it wasn't confidential. Let's make it clear. But you said to me that you'd kind of vowed you would never be part of a Church of Scotland when you came up to Perth, and you've ended up in one. You wishing I hadn't said that. You've ended up in one.
Yeah, I'm getting taught a lesson big time.
Well, that
Shut your mouth
So,
and do what I tell
do
you.
you think God's trying to make you do penance, or like what's kept you, what's brought you, and what's
It's
kept you? Yeah.
well, I've got to be honest. I wasn't even probably maybe at the start of lockdown. I probably still wasn't sure. But
Mm-hmm.
what I did know is I enjoyed our Bible group, and I enjoyed the sort of the vibes of Riverside. I
You
did.
better say
I
the
really,
preaching, and I'll be in a huff. No, I'm kidding.
yeah. Well, that's part of the vibes, man. That's part of the vibes.
Okay,
Um,
moving swiftly on.
and so we were. So I wasn't completely sure, but then we were doing a was it a prayer course or something we done?
Oh, yeah.
And I think a scripture from Kings came up, and then so let me back up. This is actually a cool story that I
Uh-huh.
want to share. I'd woke up that morning with the song "Here I Am, Lord," like a really old song.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not that old to some people, but
Like from the 1990s or something.
yeah, "Here I am, Lord, it is I."
Oh no,
I
that's
have
really ancient. Yeah, I know it.
yeah. It's based on Isaiah 6:8.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, I woke up with that, and I don't know why it was stuck in my head. But we done the Bible study that night, and I think it was in Kings. It says something very similar in
Okay.
Kings, in 1 Kings as well, somewhere. So I was like, "Oh man!" And I didn't say anything. That I messaged one of the girls in the Bible study to say, "Look, this has basically been my day."
Mm.
And then, so during the 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 Bible study and just after it, I was like, I don't know what this is all about. Like, I wasn't really sure. And then, so then I kind of started pondering it. And then I was like, maybe he's talking to me about serving. I was like, but I
Mm.
have been serving. And then pandemic hit and all that sort of stuff. So I just sort of thought, you know what, maybe I'm being told to do something or asked to do something. So that's basically what sort of committed me to Riverside is I'm like,
Mm.
right, okay, I'm being spoken to here.
Mm-hmm.
Don't want to be too freaky with people, but I really feel as if I'm being pushed in a certain direction. So it's more not about what I want.
Mm.
I probably, if you ask me again, if we could go back in time, I'd probably still say the same thing.
Mm.
But sometimes you've just got to shut up and listen and do what you're told.
Well, like I for one, I'm grateful to God that He pushed you in our direction, and I want to thank you. I'm trying to keep these really short for the service, so I want to thank you for your time, and thanks, Mark, for sharing with us today as well.
Thanks for talking to me. Cheers, mate.
The reading today is Matthew chapter 27 from verses 1 to 10. Early in the morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people made their plans how to have Jesus executed. So they bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate the governor. When Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus was condemned, he was seized with remorse and returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. "I've sinned," he said, "for I've betrayed innocent blood." "What's that to us?" they replied. "That's your responsibility." So Judas threw the money into the temple and left. Then he went away and hanged himself. The chief priests picked up the coins and said, "It's against the law to put this into the treasury, since it's blood money." So they decided to use the money to buy the potter's field as a burial place for foreigners. That is why it has been called the Field of Blood to this day. Then what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. They took the 30 pieces of silver, the price set on him by the people of Israel, and they used them to buy the potter's field, as the Lord commanded me. Amen. Thanks to those of you who got in touch with questions, and I've got some crackers here. Let me just pull them up on my phone. Let me take them in a different order. So, number one, why did Judas react in the way that he did? What did he expect to happen to Jesus? So, we followed Judas' story, and he's very deliberately handed Jesus over. So, why then is he so totally distraught when Jesus is tried? Well, it's possible that he was so consumed with anger and evil that he didn't even think it through what would happen to Jesus. It's possible that he wasn't really in control of himself to a certain extent. He may have been so motivated by evil within him or from outside of him, and he's certainly depicted as, the traitor and betrayer in the Gospels. So maybe he just almost couldn't help himself. But then after the deed was done, he maybe just couldn't believe it, or maybe he disassociated himself from those actions. That's possible. But some people think that maybe Judas, maybe there's more going on behind the text than we quite realise when we're reading it. Perhaps he thought he was doing the movement a favour. Maybe he thought by bringing things to a head with Jesus and the chief priests, maybe we can make happen what we want to happen. Maybe he thought Jesus was moving too slowly. Is it possible? It could simply be that he is a nasty guy, but then he just didn't think through what was going to happen. Or it could be that he thinks something else is going to happen. Maybe he thinks he's going to bring things to their conclusion, but instead it's not the conclusion he wanted. Maybe he thought Jesus would be victorious and that he was moving things along in that direction. That's a couple of possibilities. There's another good question here. Hold on. So the Pharisees were trying to condemn an innocent man. They're okay with that kind of immorality. But when Judas is so remorseful about what he's done that he takes the money back to them, the blood money, they don't want to put it in the temple treasury, so they use it to buy a field in the potter's field, we're told. I wonder if this connects back to last week. Last week someone commented that, is the high priest's actions completely wrong, or do they actually think they're doing the right thing? And I wonder if they do. I suspect the blood money is a problem, because it's betrayal money, or because it's, there were quite strict purity laws about blood and how it was contaminated. So it could be something to do with that. So they don't want the money back. But maybe they actually think that they're not being immoral getting rid of Jesus. They think they're actually being righteous. Now, we wondered that last week. Are they simply cynical, or do they really believe that they're standing up for the glory of God by getting rid of this blasphemer? And I think that's evidence for the latter, that they really thought they were being righteous getting rid of Jesus. I want to take the last two questions here together. Why are there different accounts of the death of Judas between Matthew's Gospel and the book of Acts? And Why does the author attribute the quote to Jeremiah when the text is actually from Zechariah? Okay, so I was speaking to a friend this week about a meeting they had with colleagues. And at that meeting, they were a bit mischievous. And so they started off the meeting by saying, I really feel that we need to stop, to collaborate, and to listen. Now, I suspect half the room was rolling about laughing, but the rest might have thought, well, yeah, that sounds really sensible. We do need to stop and maybe consider where we are. We do need to collaborate, to work together, and to listen to each other. And in a sense, they're both right. We would take that as good advice for how we should work in teams. And yet, if we're fans of late 90s rap, or even early 90s, is it? I don't know. If we're fans of rap music from the turn of the century, then we'll recognise that as lyrics from Vanilla Ice, and we'll probably have trouble concentrating on the rest of what's going on. If we don't know the subtext or some of the background and context, if we don't know the culture that something's coming from, we just see the words as they are, and we miss things that are going on. And there's a scholar called R.T. France who says that the word used for Judas hanging himself, that word is only used one other place in the Bible, and it's to do with the betrayal of David. So King David is betrayed, and the hanging, the word there, is used of his betrayer. So it could be that while Luke uses maybe more factual language to say what happened to Judas, it could be that Matthew is actually alluding not only to what happened to Judas, but he's pointing back to the Old Testament and how Jesus is a fulfillment of so what happened to King David then also happened to the son of David, the Messiah. So actually the way that Matthew tells it is almost another way of affirming that Jesus is the Messiah. And it's not so much getting the death part factually correct as getting the symbolic connection to the Old Testament right. And then he also has an idea about the Jeremiah and Zechariah thing. He says that although the words are from Zechariah, a huge part of the concept is from Jeremiah. And so while we would read Zechariah and the quote there and say, well, he's got the wrong prophet, if we know that the text and the allusion well, then we might see actually both prophets are quoted in this fulfillment text. It may be that actually because both prophets are there, but only one of them is named, and R.T. France points out that there's other places where the more senior prophet is the one that is named, even though there's more than one prophecy in that fulfillment text. And Jeremiah, being the more senior prophet, is the one who is named because he is also part of the fulfillment, even though Zechariah is the more direct quotation. And that isn't as crazy as it seems. In films, we know that thousands of people are involved in making a film, but normally we just talk about the director and the main actors. So we don't necessarily name everybody involved in a project, we just name the main well-known people. So is it possible then that Jeremiah is named because he's the more senior of the two prophets? So I realise there's another part of the question I should answer. There is a difference between the way that Matthew talks about the field that was purchased and the way that Acts does. One says that the priests bought the field, and one says that Judas bought the field. And so people say, well, what do we do? Is this a terrible contradiction we need to fix? How do we deal with these kind of things? So I think there's many ways we could look at it. Sometimes people try to create combinations. So is there a way of combining the two stories? Another way is to do with the words. So in the same way that we could see a connection between the words that Matthew used for Judas hanging himself and the connection to the death of a person that betrayed David in the Old Testament. So then it's not so important whether the hanging himself and the falling on the ground and bursting over are brought together, because it may be that one of them is trying to connect the story to the Old Testament but not actually say exactly what happened. So maybe Matthew's aims are different from Luke's aims in what he's trying to do and to tell us. Matthew's reminding us that Jesus is the Messiah. he's managed to get that into the story of Judas dying. That might not be the same intention in Luke. But again, it is possible. Some people synthesize it and say, well, yeah, of course, Judas hung himself, but then he would drop, onto the ground and burst open, so which is disgusting as well. So, it's possible to synthesize the two stories. And then there's also and this is a much more controversial area, but we don't know the sources that they were working from. And what we do know is that a field was bought, and we do know that Judas died. And is it possible that these are things that were passed on in the tradition, which Matthew and Luke both know, but they don't necessarily have the entire story? It's not history the way that it was written, it would be written today, sorry. So if maybe they don't have the whole narrative that puts together who exactly bought the field and how exactly Judas died, but they both know that the field was bought and Judas died in it. So some people, although this is a much more flexible approach, some people would say, well, it's possible that they've had to weave together a story, and in order to do that, they've understood it in different ways. But the central fact of the field being bought and Judas dying in it, or dying in connection to it, those are facts at the base of the story which they've woven together. Now, some people will find that much more difficult, but that there are other areas sometimes where that seems to be a possibility, if not the whole story. Lastly, some people would say that it could simply be terminology. We might not understand or pick up on all the nuances in the subtext or in the words that are used. So is it possible that Judas buying the field directly, or the blood money of Judas through the high priests, or priests bought the field? So is Judas buying the field a shorthand for the high priests buying the field with the money that Judas gave back to them? Who's the exact purchaser? And some people have given examples of, if someone gives me money to buy them something, which one of us bought it, me or them? That kind of thing. So there's lots of different possibilities for how these come together, and what exactly is going on in the story. But you maybe have to make up your own mind on which answer you think is right. A friend of mine has challenged a few of us to a 2-minute sermon. He's going to give us the text and we try and talk just for 2 minutes on it. And I thought, given how much is crammed into this week's service, maybe 2 minutes is just enough. And so let's start the clock. The motivation of the chief priests and scribes has really caught my attention. We talked about it last week, because it seemed like they honestly thought to get rid of Jesus was a God-honouring thing to do. And then this week, someone asked the question, why won't they take the blood money, given that they were willing to allow an innocent man to be betrayed? The interesting thing is that with that blood money, they try and do something good with it. They buy a field for a cemetery for foreigners, which seems to be an attempt at something moral. It really seems that the chief priests think that what they are doing is righteous, to get rid of Jesus of Nazareth. It's made me think, how often are we human beings so convinced that we're right, that our way is righteous, that we don't care about how we treat other people in the process? How often do we, as Christians, think it's okay to treat those who disagree with us badly, because we believe that our way is righteous? But it's not just Christians. If you hang about online or on Twitter, you will see that everybody thinks their way is righteous, and everybody thinks that means it's okay to be horrendous to other people. And so the chief priests think they are being righteous because they disagree with Jesus of Nazareth and they need to get rid of him, and they think that honours God. It's a challenge to us. How do we treat those that we consider to be our enemies? And then lastly, isn't it incredible that God took the absolute worst thing that has been done on earth, the betrayal and execution of the Son of God, and he turned that evil deed into the way of salvation and righteousness? We are made right through this terrible injustice. Amen.